So, welcome again, everyone. I am your host, Madame Askew, supremely cheeky, and your co-host and my co-conspirator in organizing is the delightful buttery goodness himself, Bill Barden. Hello, Bill. And so today we're going to talk about Babel by R.F. Kuang. Is an amazing book, and it was so long. Bill and I decided that it had to be our January read because the only way you'd have enough time to read it is if we gave you multiple months. So you had all of December and much of January to read it, a fair bit of November to tackle it. So we hope that you were able to put a dent in it. However, if you did not finish the book, there are no grades here. No one's going to judge you. We're just happy you're here and happy you're ready to discuss. There may be some spoilers, so prepare yourselves. And for those of you who have not been with us before, we go through the room and everyone gets an opportunity to speak on the book at least once. Or you can think of it as me being the worst person in the world who will call on everyone at least once, whether you want me to or not. So that's what's going to happen. For those of you following along on the Book of Faces, I will try and pop in and see if you have any questions. I may miss them, though. I do apologize. So, all right. Let's get started. I'm going to throw out a question and I want to hear from all of you and your cats. Hello, it's the delightful Boba. Hello, pussycat. So, I wanted to start out with a sort of classic question, and that is, who was your favorite character? This has an amazing cast of characters. You are permitted to answer with 3 characters or 2 or just 1. We are not strict here. So if you're like, I have a million favorites, I might cut you off after 5. All right. Okay, so Lady June Score, would you start us off? Who was your favorite character in the book?
I don't really like anybody in this book.
Really?
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 I'm not sure how to pronounce her name because I don't know French. Is it Victoire or Victoria?
Victoire. Yeah.
Victoire?
Yeah.
Okay. She's my favorite and just about only favorite character.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting. You didn't care for Robin. All right.
No, I didn't care for Robin.
Oh. I'm just fascinated because
Yeah.
I liked Robin.
Well, of course,
So,
you're supposed to like Robin,
yeah, I
especially what he does with the end. At the end, you're supposed to really like that. Huh?
mean, I don't
I'm
know that
never very big on books where the characters bring disasters upon themselves at the ends of books, including Beth Cato's book the first in that series.
Oh, all right. Yeah. Okay. All right. That's fair. That's fair. All right. Thank you, Lady June Squill. We're going to come back to this and we'll
Yeah,
talk
you can
about.
talk about the people I don't like too.
Oh,
I really don't like.
that's the next question. So don't
Okay,
you worry. We're going to talk about all the villains of the story.
God.
All right. Karen J. Carlisle, please share.
Hello.
Did you like anyone and who was it that you liked?
Snap. I actually didn't have a favorite other than maybe Victoire.
Okay.
But that's because I understood pretty really early on that Robin was sort of an anti-hero for some people and hero for others.
Mm.
So I sort of liked the initial thing, and I could sympathize with his abuse situation. And I understand he was there to help us look into racism and colonialism, which was good. But he got to a point where I couldn't follow him any further when he was actually starting to kill people and stuff. I could totally understand why he was doing it and see his point of view. But that didn't necessarily make him my favorite character, if that makes sense.
All right.
But he definitely did show the desperation and make us feel that stuffy, claustrophobic, control colonialism world.
Right.
Does that
So,
make sense?
yeah,
I've
it
got
does
a lot
make sense.
more to say about that later.
Right. Okay.
Well,
Good.
yeah.
Good. All right. So you like Victoire?
I think Victoire's probably the closest that came to being a favorite character, I think.
Mm.
Yeah.
All right. I think she'd be pleased. Thank you, Karen. All right. Captain Charity, please share with us who was your favorite. If you like someone, who was it?
Okay, so I hate almost everybody in the book. I hate them. Rami was my closest to favorite
Interesting.
because Victoire could have stepped up and said something to Letty about not using the indoor potty. You could have said something in the 4 years you were together, but no, you didn't say anything because you thought the rich white bitch would notice. Sorry, but I couldn't stand Victoire for that. But Rami's first introduction was, no, I'm here to subvert the colonialism and use their prejudice against them. Go Rami. So
Yeah.
that's
All
that's
right.
my favorite. He never deviated.
Interesting. So I'd love to come back and talk more about the Victoire Letty dynamic. And I mean, I have a very different opinion on that than you do, but I'm fascinated by your reaction and your feelings on that. So thank you. Excellent. All right. Kelsey, hello, welcome.
No, I actually like I understand that all of the characters are going to be deeply flawed, but Rami is also my favorite. He won me over immediately the moment he started making up stuff about where he was from
Yes,
and
so great.
messing with everyone. I absolutely love that as a survival tactic. And I thought it was such a good contrast to how Robin would deal with things. But Rami's moments of just making up these extremely elaborate stories to mess with people, I love that about him. I was sad about his fate, but I adored him.
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
great.
even though he did things that I didn't agree with later on, his early chapters were just fantastic.
Excellent. Thank you, Kelsey. All right, Alicia, please share if you liked anyone who it was.
I sense a theme.
This is so honestly, I am startled because I loved all of the main characters except for Letty. So, you know, I have a
Yeah,
very different perspective, but I
like,
want to. Who did you
oh
like?
no, go ahead. I wanted to like a lot of the characters. Like I did. I did. Rami was probably an early favorite just
Mm,
just because I just thought it was because every story I could hear just the sarcasm dripping off
mm-hmm.
and the stupid people not realizing or not hearing it,
Right.
right?
So
So
good.
yeah, I I really didn't like. I wanted to like a lot of the characters, but
Mm,
ultimately really didn't like very many of them. um yeah, Letty is a whole different conversation.
yeah. We
um
may touch on Letty as just a topic. We'll see how it goes. So,
but yeah, I mean, I wanted to, but I found it very difficult. And as you said, it was going to be a tough read, and it was a tough read. There's a couple times I put it down and walked away for a few days because I was like, I can't read this. I can't.
yeah. It's a
So
heavy read. It really
yeah.
is. It's a lot. It tackles a lot of heavy themes. So,
Mhm.
yeah. All right. Thank you, Alicia. Okay. Laura, please share. Did you like anyone? And if so, who was it?
I like Robin and Rami and Victoire. I like all
Okay.
three of them.
All right, good. I have an ally in liking the three
Yeah.
of them. That's great.
I know that again, Robin is deeply flawed character, but we're going on this journey with him, you know? And so I feel like we have a lot more insight into reasons why he's doing things or not doing things than we do some of the other characters who maybe get a chapter from their perspective, but nothing
Right,
else.
right.
I also liked Anthony, and I mean, I sort of liked Griffin, kind of. Not
Griffin's complicated, right? Yeah, Griffin. Well, thank you, Laura. I'm glad that I'm not alone. I was starting to feel like, my goodness, do I have just Is my bar low? What's going on? So, different perspective. Maybe I'm more bloodthirsty. I don't know. So, but Laura, excellent. Thank you. And we are going to have to talk about Griffin. We just have to. All right, Cindy Joy, did you like anyone, and if so, who?
Well, so the main characters are extremely flawed and like have all these coping mechanisms to survive and to deal with basically serving their oppressors. Robin especially. Well, Robin, you see it more.
Yes.
I liked Robin and Rami and Victoire, and to a lesser extent Letty, but really my favorite character in the book is Mrs. Piper.
Oh, the housekeeper.
Yeah.
The housekeeper. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And
oh, but
you know, she kind of knows the abuse that's going on, but she does what she can to mitigate it. And I feel like she really loves Robin.
I feel that, and I wonder if she really loves all the children that Professor Lowell brings through and does her best by them. And I was thinking about her quite a bit before we came to book club today, and wondering, you know, sort of imagining what it would have been like. She was also at the mercy of the professor, and who knows if he was also abusing her. She had limited options. It does not necessarily,
Women in Victorian times, limited options always.
right? It doesn't necessarily absolve her of
No.
being complicit. But I think the thing about this book is that we can return to is none of the characters is wholly good. None of the characters is wholly good. Some of them are, in fact, wholly bad. But, you know, none of them are wholly good. They're all flawed. And I think that's a little bit subversive, because often when we're talking about things like colonialism, racism, imperialism, sexism, storytellers, writers will have a perfect minority who's flawless so that they're easy to defend. But this author is creating people who do some things that are hard to defend, but they still are worthy of respect, right? So it's complicated.
Right. And I think it made the characters feel more real too. Is when no one in the entire universe is entirely good or entirely bad.
Not usually.
Okay, there can be some people that it's really hard to find anything good about them.
Right, redeeming qualities, yeah.
But being entirely good is not really a thing.
Right, that's correct.
But Mrs. Piper did the best she could with the situation that she was in.
Yeah.
And she mitigated a lot of stuff for Robin.
She did, and
she's just so sweet.
She was very sweet, and
she made great scones.
She made great scones. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, Cindy Joy. Dear Beatrix and Crolius, how wonderful to see both of you looking very snug.
So happy to be here, and so glad you picked this book.
Yes.
It was my time around for reading it, so thank you for that opportunity.
You're welcome. Yeah.
As we were just talking for a moment, I flashed on something one of my friends will say sometimes about situations, which is that everyone is the hero in their own story.
Yeah.
And so for that reason, I didn't like any of the four, the cohort of the four students. And on the second reading, I actually had more sympathy for Letty than I did on the first reading.
Yeah.
So, but I didn't dislike any of those, but I wouldn't. I mean, everything that's been said about the pleasant aspects about the characters, I would agree with.
Yeah. Thank you, Beatrix. Carolius, what are your thoughts?
It was really quite interesting. The starting, you would have one opinion of people, and you like this person and that person, And as the book progressed and we learned more and the situations changed, I liked other people better. And finally getting to the end, wow, I liked who was his name? Abe Abdul, the labor union guy.
Yeah.
He was like one of my favorites, just coming out, to use a phrase, an Oxfordian phrase, sui generis, on his own,
Yeah.
from the Latin sui, meaning self. Anyway, nevertheless, yeah, there was him. And as a character, if this were a movie, there was Mrs. Pipes, the Pepper, that is to say. Yeah, she was great. Hermione Gingold could have played her. Remember Hermione Gingold?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Anywho.
She's a great character. I'd love to see her realized, sort of busting around, making response.
Initially, I liked the sort of sardonic, witted Ramiz Mazar. And so then as the book progressed, I really liked the renditions of Professor Playfair in this class. His sort of pompousness. He would have been a great movie character as well.
Right.
And he's good-hearted. But then the more we learned about what happened up there on the 8th floor of the Tower of Babel, you really couldn't like the guy anymore. Perniciously self-grabbing, pecuniary soul that he had, and his grip over Oxford and most of the country, through his manipulations of silver.
Yes.
So, and there was Griffin, but I think the guy who really demonstrated real cool and a kind of savoir-faire under great pressure was Anthony. And he was a favorite of mine for that. So I have Mrs. Pipes, Anthony, Abdul, the labor guy. And at the end, although maybe not a favorite character throughout the book, but just as an act of self-will and self-determination, when Letty decided to go out and take a break and rat on her friends, I thought, well, that's a big turnabout. She didn't get swept up in personal feelings for a situation that she thought would be, on one hand, inconsequential in the nature of the world, but would only lead to the death and destruction of many innocent people.
Yeah.
And so I had a respect for Letty in doing that. And she never actually really gave up her affection for her chums.
No.
But and then the Chakasandra, the Sanskrit scholar in Babel, who was one of the Hermes implants.
Yeah.
He was very good-natured and perceptive. And he also had the fortitude to also leave the group. Yeah. Because, as Letty pointed out at the very end, well, the bridge fell, all these people die, and what does it matter? The people in Parliament are sitting in the dark and laughing at everyone. Anything you do is completely inconsequential in the face of their power and distribution of wealth and the extension of time. And so there you have it. And then I think finally Robin came around and realized, following his plan, that, well, the way to solve this situation is through my own death.
Oh, Robin. Yeah.
And
oh,
so,
Robin.
yeah, you had to go along with that. I mean, you know, and that really was the only way out. And he took it, and then the other 5 or 6 people with him,
Yeah.
so who we didn't hear a lot about, but still,
Who
there they
had
were.
their own stories. These are likely very interesting in their own
Yeah,
rights. Yeah. Well, thank you, Carolius. We're going to come back to some of these topics as we're able, because there's a lot going on with the characters and the book, themes of the book. But of course, we'll never get through everything because we're chatty people. So, Scone Mistress, did you have a favorite of the characters?
There's a couple characters, like a number of them have been touched on. I want to go back to Playfair because, good God, the arrogance of this man, like the absolute, like, stereotypical white British rich, like when he walked up to Robin and was like, "Oh, your friends at Hermes would like to know I'm Hermes." I went, "Playfair, sweetie, honey, no, no." The arrogance of him trying to pretend he's there. I'm like, why didn't they put Chakravarti up to that? Like, he would be far more plausible. And then later you find out, oh, he was already in, and we're like, dang.
Yeah.
But it's like Playfair, he's just so arrogant, like overplayed his hand so fast with them being
Yes.
like, "Oh yeah, you can go off. We'll meet you in the sun there because I'm totally Hermes." Because that's totally believable from you.
Right. Well, I think he really thought he had um some bond of affection with these students from years, right? So he's an interesting character. And a real subversion of that classic trope of the sort of jovial, bigger than life professor who's so life-changing, and it turns out actually he's not good at all. So,
And he's absolutely dreadful in
yeah,
all accounts. Like,
yeah.
the students basically have to kill themselves to get his thing. So this character is just like, yeah, no. And um there's a lot of the villains. It's the, like, especially all of the, like, white merchants when they go to Canton.
Yes, but
Um,
before we get into the villains,
yeah.
Scorn Mistress, we're
Oh
not
my
going to
God.
talk about villains yet. We're going to come back to the villains. So hold it in your heart.
No, no,
Oh,
I liked
hold on.
them because they were just so unapologetically awful. And
Oh,
it's like these are how they really were. And like
yes.
we're not, trying to pretend that these guys are anything but. And then it's just the one that Robin has to narrate for, and then it's like, oh, he's so unapologetically awful. It's just like like almost compelling of just like watching a train wreck crash burn.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, no real sympathy for their suffering. So, all right,
And but I also want to bring up, because nobody's brought her up, Professor Kraft.
Professor Kraft. Yeah,
Girl showed up at the end.
she
Girl
did.
basically went, you know what? This shit is bad. I've always known it's bad. I'm probably not going to get tenure, but you know what? I'm going to do something good. I'm going to
No,
do something good.
she was never going to get tenure. Never. Yeah, she's right. She was never going to get tenure. So, yeah, poor Professor Kraft. Interesting character. She really goes on a journey from when we first meet her, I think. So, thank you, Scone Mistress. Great insights. Bill, did you like anyone in the book?
I didn't really dislike any of the cohort of 4. I just
All
didn't
right.
find them, characters that I admired particularly.
Mm,
I think the people I admired most in this book were the bit characters. Commissioner Lin in Canton, the one who burned all the opium.
right.
Uh, I mean, that was a fairly pivotal moment in the story,
Yes.
and took a lot of guts because Britain had a lot more firepower, just in all ways than
Yes.
China did. And Mrs. Piper, the Professor Lovell's housekeeper, another fun character, and she definitely seemed like she had her heart the right place.
Yeah. Even if she wasn't able to totally mitigate things, she
Yeah, she
at
couldn't do a
least,
lot, so she she threw all her love and care into making food for people, which
yeah.
is, you know, that's impressive nonetheless.
I think that she's an interesting juxtaposition to the professor because she sees these young people as human beings and children, and he really sees them as resources, right? So,
Yeah, he sees them as tools,
yeah,
essentially.
not necessarily even human beings of any variety.
Yeah.
So speaking of Professor Lowell, let's talk about our villains right now. So there are many villains in the book, and I do think some of the heroes have some villainous qualities, depending on your philosophical approach, your feelings about certain things. Um, but the villains are very juicy, and I think most of them are not two-dimensional villains, which is really nice. Some of them are more flat than others. But which was the villain you most loved to hate, is my question for you. And if it's Letty, who's a complicated character, shall we say, put a pin in it because I'm going to ask you about Letty specifically. So, Kelsey, would you like to start us out with who was someone you loved to hate in the book?
Um, Definitely the professor, was it Lowell?
Yeah.
I'm blanking.
Oh,
He was my most hated. Not super close after for different reasons, Letty, but I'll put a pin in that since we're going to talk about her later.
yes,
But
yes.
like his turn whenever poor Robin was reading his book, like I had to set the book down for a few minutes. It was
Yes.
really well written, but that was just absolutely powerful. And every time I start to think, okay, well, maybe he's got something. And he said, for God's sake, she was just a woman later on when they were talking about Robin's mother. I just am like, no, no, you get whatever's coming to you.
Sort of
And
irredeemable, right?
yeah, there was just nothing there. Like every time I thought, okay, maybe, no, no, and I do like a villain that is absolutely a villain, but my goodness, I'm I can't even imagine how he talked to Mrs. Piper in private too, that she didn't do anything for Robin because that seems so out of character for her to not do anything. I'm sure he's threatened her or done something that she knows that her position is limited. And maybe, not to put her on a pedestal because that's not right either, but it just that was such a well written but brutal part.
It's a real turning point, right? I think for me, up until that moment, I was like, well, maybe the professor's just, emotionally reserved. Maybe he's trying to infiltrate. Maybe he's trying to change things up. And it's at that moment, no, he is no one's ally. Does not care about this child in any way, shape, or form. It's really terrible moment. And I had to step away from the book after reading that portion as well. It's brutal, efficient, incredibly well written, and very distressing. So, yeah. Thank you,
Definitely.
Kelsey. All right, Captain Charity, I see you bopping around. So before you bop on down the road, can you share with us who you loved to hate?
Okay, so I absolutely despise Lovell from the second one.
Mm.
He was like, well, yeah, you're gonna get better, whatever. Like the child is dying. What? So
Right.
like first instinct was, you're not here to save anybody. You're doing something shady, and I don't trust you, and I don't like you. And I'm like, okay, cool. So that was my first hatred of him, and I continued to hate him the entire thing because he reminded me very, very much of certain people in my family.
Oh,
Yeah, so instant hatred. I'm okay with this. Letty, I liked for most of it, but again, my heart, it broke a lot, quite a bit actually. But the one that I absolutely wanted to like, and the other one I hated, was Playfair.
mm.
Because he was every bit of I'm the cool guy. Look at me, I'm a hip, cool kid. I mean, no, no, I hate him. you are the guy that I want to kidney shank.
Yes.
And the entire time I'm just like, yep, no, you deserve to die. You think you're that, brilliant and insightful, and you've been rehearsing this for 30 years, and I still want to shank you in the kidneys. All right, cool. So those are my most hated. Everyone else I hated for legitimate political, socioeconomic reasons. But those ones were just personally just punch them in the face.
Well, Playfair, I think, should have gone out with a septic paper cut, or maybe, a little nibbed pen to the, artery. He really should have gone out in some academic way in the stacks, ideally.
Right? Shank him in the kidney with a paper, like a letter opener?
Yeah, perfect.
Poison.
Well, thank you, Captain Charity. And I see that you are in your vehicle, so hopefully we'll get to hear from you again, but I'm going to give you time to get where you're going. Right.
Excellent. I will go off camera, but I'm still listening.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, Karen J. Carlisle, author extraordinaire. Who did you love to hate in this book?
Well, there was lots of villainous people, but a lot of them had their reasons, and you could see. But yeah, it was Lovell. I really didn't like him. He just was not nice because he just wasn't not nice. He just enjoyed his power a bit too much, and because he was white and because he was English, he had all the control, and he loved exercising control over everyone else, and he seemed to have everyone's ticket, and it just. I really hate people that control other people like that. Probably goes back to personal things, but yeah, it just almost everyone else you could sort of see, even though you didn't agree, you could see how they got to the point they were. But Lovell just seems to be a arsehat. He just he's not a nice soul.
He is not a nice soul. He's terrible. Thank you, Karen.
Yeah. We'll talk
thank
about
you.
it later.
Yeah, we're gonna talk more. Hopefully we'll come back to some of this villainousness because there's so much villainy.
I've got stuff to say about later, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to say. All right, Cindy Joy, who did you love to hate?
Professor Lovell. I mean, I know you're shocked, but yeah. So in addition to everything that everyone else has said, he neglected his wife and his children.
Right.
His legitimate children.
Yeah.
And he didn't acknowledge. I mean, he would go to China, get a woman pregnant, and then watch over the child until it was old enough to rip away from its family and take it to England, take the child to England. It was if you were not a white man of a certain status in the British Empire, you were nothing to him other than a tool. And it was just so gross.
Yeah.
And whatever he needed to do to get you to do what he wanted you to do, he would do it. Including like hanging out just out of sight until your mother died before he came over and rescued Robin.
Yeah.
That was just despicable.
2 weeks. 2 weeks.
2 weeks he was sitting in Macau.
Yeah.
2 weeks and didn't do anything, and let Miss Betty die too, who was his hired person for Robin's life. Robin's whole life up to that point, this British woman dedicated herself to his education, and he just discarded her.
Well, she was just
and that's just the first 2 chapters of the book up until the point where he beats Robin with a poker. And it's just like, I mean, how could you not hate him? He's the whole power machinations and manipulating whole countries into going to war just so that Britain can have more power and more wealth and take away from more people. It's so infinitely despicable and gross. It's just, so there's no competition. Well, and we do get more insight into Professor Lovell than anyone else because of Robin's contact with him.
Right.
But and And Professor Level's cohorts are also terrible.
Yes, they are.
But we are definitely given more reason to hate Professor Level than anyone else.
I think he's a wonderful stand-in, sort of like a metaphor for the entirety of his class and his type of human in the British Empire. So he's a stand-in for sort of a wide range of villainy, right?
Yeah. You
Terrible.
know, and being shoved off a boat in the middle of the ocean on the way back to England is just completely
Right. They probably should have come up with some better lies about what happened to him, but you know,
yes, they should have.
they were not practiced.
Really, it should have been, he was up on deck and fell off during the night.
Yes, absolutely. That fool, he was reading
and
more
then they
poetry.
don't have to do any other lies.
Right. No, he fell off. Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, they needed us as conspirators. Thank you.
We can come up with better reasons than these children can.
We're older. Right.
He's not feeling well.
Right. Right. Oh, thank you, Cindy Joy. All right, Laura, who did you love to hate in the book?
Well, of course, Professor Level, for all the reasons previously stated.
Yeah.
And Professor Playfair, because at the beginning you really want to like him, but then as soon as he confronts Robin after Robin gets shot, you know, and he's like poking at his shoulder and, you know, all of that. And I'm like, I can't like him. I can't like him at all. And then the missionaries and merchants, when they were in Canton, they were also awful. The things that the guy was making Robin translate, and Robin's like, just gonna do it straight, you know?
Yeah.
So that they know that I'm not adding any of this. It's actually the words they're saying. So
hard being a translator sometimes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Laura. All right, Alicia, you've got that hair of doom going on. You've clearly got some feelings. Your hair looks fabulous, by the way, but you're like, I can see you pondering. So who did you love to hate? Who did you love to hate?
Yeah. So there are just certain characters in certain books that are truly irredeemable.
Yes.
And yeah, Lovell ranks up there with Christine Daae and Milady de Winter from the Three Musketeers. He is just at that level of you must die.
Yeah.
You don't deserve the privilege of life.
Yeah.
Please let me help you. Yeah, he definitely is up there. And I think, as you said, he does represent that. I think he is supposed to be the representation of all that Babel is, and all that it represents and all that it chooses to do. And I think that was, in my opinion, how the author sort of, whatever this word is.
Yes, that
pushed it all into that character.
Yeah.
That whole concept and that whole idea of colonialism and the terrible unthinking side of it. And I think it plus other issues that I had a lot of problems with for other reasons. But yeah, I mean, him and definitely Playfair. Like Playfair, I think less so, because early on I was like, oh, he doesn't seem, wait, this is sus. Hang on. He doesn't seem, this isn't like I'm being cool. I'm being weird and sus, and thus cool. I think so. Definitely those two.
Right, and Playfair felt more like a betrayal in some ways, because he had sort of hinted at being more in the students' corner, and then suddenly you find out
he's not. Yeah,
he's not the worst. Terrible.
I agree. But yeah, as far as villains, definitely those two.
Yeah.
Letty, I don't see as a villain. I mean, it is a betrayal. I get it, but I don't necessarily put her into the realm of villains.
Right.
As far as the book goes. But those two,
yeah, those two. That Just terrible.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, they all
exactly.
need to fall off a boat somewhere very convenient. So, yeah.
They do, but I think those two characters are sort of the gross representation of that whole concept of why everyone else is doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
At least in my opinion, I think that's why those characters are there, and I think that's why the writer wrote them that way.
Yes.
And if you're supposed to hate them,
absolutely, absolutely.
Although a lot of people disagree with me and the other two, but that's a different book club.
It's different. All right, we'll be back. We'll be back to you someday. Who knows? Maybe we'll read Three Musketeers and we'll talk about it. So, Lady June Squill, who did you love to hate?
I don't think you'll be surprised to know that that was Professor Lovell, but my thing with him is that it was his eugenics experiment to go to China because he needed native translators for the damn silver, which we really haven't talked about, that whole concept of that. And he needed a native speaker that he could then, who had to be a boy, of course. I don't know what happened to all the girls he fucked women for. I mean, he really made me so mad.
He's terrible.
He's just terrible. Yeah, so he goes over there to well, anyway, yes. He is so far and away the worst, and he's so representative of everything. And you know, the whole silver thing is it has to be it's a metaphor, I guess, for the whole British colonialism. Yes. But the idea that he had to have a native speaker who he then brought up and wouldn't admit that he was the dad, even though everybody's like, oh my, Richard, he looks just like you. It's like, God damn it. Anyway.
Right. No, it's worthy of profanity. It really is.
That's it. That's my feeling about Professor Lovell. And I don't think anybody else really rises to that. I mean, they're all doing what they think is not the right thing, but it's what they do. You know, they're in the ivory tower, they're in Oxford, in this beautiful place, and writing on pieces of silver. But you have the whole concept of this translation. I was trying to describe this to somebody the other day, maybe my daughter, before she flipped out. That the power of the translation comes in what's lost in the translation.
What's lost in translation?
Yes. Okay, there you are. I've overwhelmed myself with.
No, I mean,
I was so glad when Robin blew him up, but it was still a shock that he finally got pushed to
his absolute breaking point. And honestly, the problem is with this book, there's so much to discuss, but it's also the joy of this book. There's so much to discuss that we can come back to it again. And I think, Beatrix Syncrolius hinted at this, that subsequent readings can give you more insights. If you are interested, we can talk a little bit about translation. That's a little bit in my actual academic bailiwick, so I have lots and lots and lots and lots of feelings about it. But Cindy Joy's got her hand up. Do you want to? We have some other people to ask, Cindy. Can I come back to you in a moment? All right, good. So before I go off on a tangent about translating, I'm so excited. I picked up a pen. Beatrix Syncrolius. You know I'm excited. I'm holding a pen. Beatrix Syncrolius, who did you love to hate? There you are. Yeah.
Me?
Yes, both of you. One at a time, of course, but it's both of your turns. Yeah.
Well, of course, there's Lovell.
Yes.
And it was. Oh yeah, these not to sound like John Cleese and his famous, retort, so typical for behaviors. I mean, there they all were. They were like John Cleese caricatures of the British Empire,
Mm.
in Faulty Towers, So, uh, so it was really the personally who I really disliked, because I had seen so many people like him, was Simmons, who interrogated Robin at the end.
Yeah.
Gave him the alternative. The the urbane, but thoroughly smarmy and class evil blonde person with power.
Yeah.
And that was his embodiment. And but everybody, had the things that we disliked about them came about because of their association with some kind of colonial power.
Yes.
And the things that we liked about the people we liked was their connection to the opposition to that kind of power.
Mm.
How they personally handled their station, and that as an inferior but intellectually superior position in a world. And the other people I really hated on a gut level were the merchants in Canton.
Yes, yes.
No, and from things that I've seen, they were absolutely true to life.
Mm-hmm.
The phrase that we still use today to all of our politics and foreign policy is free trade. And it's exactly the same. And that's why we have, more than 400 military bases all around the world. And so there you go. But we like our suppressors. They're all in Congress.
Well, Carolius, this is a conversation for something a little bit stronger than tea, probably over some whiskey later. But I do think that the book is very timely, even though it is a piece of historical fiction talking about colonialism and imperialism, soft power versus hard power in the 19th century. These are all topics that are pertinent today. And we're still dealing with the ramifications of things like the Opium War almost 200 years later. So it is pertinent, and also I do think that the analogy is warranted. But rather than go down modern politics, which is depressing, that's terrible. I'm just going to say, yes, I see what you're saying. And I'm going to shift. Beatrix, who did you love to hate? There's a lot of people to hate. So who did you love to hate?
Lovell for all the reasons everybody said, and Carolius reminded me that yes, I did hate those merchants there in Canton, and I came to this book the first time after having read the Amitav Ghosh trilogy, which is set in the Opium Wars, and I cannot recommend Amitav Ghosh too highly.
Okay.
He is another person who gets inside the skins of these characters who are trapped between the borders of two worlds, and also has beautiful prose, just as Kuang has such tasty, delicious prose. So nothing to add really on who we love to hate.
There's so much hate to spread around for some of these villains, and villainous social constructs, right? So I think probably the true villain at the heart of this will always be colonial power and imperialism, but there's some real representatives of it in the book. So Scone Mistress, who did you love to hate?
So when you say love to hate, it's for me, it's you hate them, but you enjoyed it. And I already touched in like Playfair and the merchants in Canton. it's like they're so terrible and so
Yeah.
indicative. It's like that there. But I would also, and I mean, I just straight up hated Professor Lovell. I would like, you just straight up hated him. There's no love to hate. It was just straight up hate. I would say there's definitely a love to hate a little bit. And nobody's mentioned this character but Griffin.
Oh, Griffin. Yeah.
And Griffin is very indicative of Griffin was Professor Lovell's first experiment into this and how he turned up. It's like you see him and you want to, be like, yes, I want to go for this character, but he's so misguided. And like, Robin meets him and he's just like, oh, I'm going to throw you to the wolves immediately, little brother. And it's like, I was just like, when, Robin said, oh, I'm done, I was like, thank goodness, because your older brother, he a hot mess. Like after pulling all this crap, he's wanting you to make explosives? No, 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 no. 10 times no, 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 no. And he did half redeem himself near the end, and he got both Robin and I'm gonna mispronounce her name, Victoire. He got them out of prison, but then he immediately went, "Oh, Sterling. Well, I'm just gonna do a whole murder suicide pact with you because reasons, and then I'm just gonna leave my little brother hanging in this massive like crap thing that I basically started when I first found him and brought him into Hermes." Like,
Yeah. It's I think we're going to, I don't know if we'll have time, but we may talk about Griffin and Robin and that relationship because they came from the same sort of place and they really had a very different reaction to their situation. It's interesting to see how diverse their sort of survival mechanisms were. But Griffin, as some mentioned earlier, he's the bad boy that some of us might have dated in university. Very passionate, very fiery, very, convincing. And Robin really wants to love him, right? He wants to be loved. And Griffin is not good at reciprocating love. So, oh, Griffin. Bill, my darling, who did you love to hate?
Well, of course, Lovell. I mean, that's obvious. But the thing that I found really interesting about him is that he is crap, I can't think of the word. It's a psychological term. He everyone is a tool to him.
He's a
A means to an
sociopath.
end. So thank you. Yes,
You're
he's a
welcome.
sociopath.
Yes, he definitely is.
Absolutely. He's a total sociopath. And that's his thing. His own family, he has no regard for them, doesn't
Right.
care. They're just a means to an end. He keeps them and literally keeps them for propriety's sake.
Yeah.
I also, one of the merchants in Canton, Mr. Bayless, the guy that Robin had translate for. So, I mean, this is so full of the bluster, the pompous bluster that we associate with the British colonialism. I mean, he
Yes.
was a stereotype.
He was.
And yeah, I think Corellius mentioned the Simmons, the guy who was interrogating Robin.
Mm.
Again, utterly soulless person
Yeah.
who, and all of these people, they don't see. There's a certain subset of people that they find acceptable, and everything else is not exactly human. So they justify their treatment of their horrible treatment of other people with that rationalization.
Yeah.
There are just way too many people in this book to not like. It's kind of staggering.
It's
But
hard. Yeah.
so many of them, I've met a lot of people like that, and yeah, the people like that are really out there.
So we're going to talk about Letty next, speaking about complicated people. But But it occurred to me as we've been speaking and we've been talking through the characters and some of the themes of the book that we have a little clue from the author from the beginning when Robin names himself after Jonathan Swift, great writer of satire and of commentary on the social situation of the day, Irishman, and that she is using some characters in a very similar way where they are essentially, metaphors and lessons and ideas rather than fully fledged individuals. But she is definitely bringing them a lot of depth and three-dimension, which we were not necessarily getting from Robin Swift in the same way, or rather Jonathan Swift in the same way. Just, it's an interesting little thing to put in your brains to think about. Cindy, you've been so patient. Your hand has been up. Please share with us before we move on to talking about Letty.
Well, I just need to. So looping back around to the eugenic aspect of Professor Lovell, he really made me feel like he needed these translators who were
native speakers
in both English and Chinese, but somehow they would be unworthy if they didn't also have his blood in them. They're subhuman because they're half Chinese, but they need to be half him or they'll be completely worthless. And it just added another level of just slimy grossness to it.
Yeah. It does, and it's very much, I mean, the eugenics portion is we definitely won't have time to get into it all the way, but is a terrible part of history and an important but terrible part of the story. I think that there's as a linguist, there's a lot of interesting things going on with the discussion around linguistics. I think we're going to have to talk about that after Leticia because we need to talk about it. So, Scone Mistress, you have your hand up.
I was also going to add, not only did they need to be his blood, they had to be able to work silver. So one of the reasons why Griffin went the way he did is because he couldn't make the cut to work on the 8th floor. And they were like, oh, you could be a translator, work at the lower things legal. But Griffin says that that wasn't good enough for Professor Lovell and ultimately and he agreed. That's why he ended up on the way he did, because he couldn't work in silver.
Yeah. Thank you for reminding us of that, Robin. It is a really important aspect of the story. Karen, your hand was up. You're furiously excited. Please share.
Okay, that was several comments ago, but yeah. Did anyone get the feeling of 1984 from this book?
Oh, yeah, I mean,
I did, and that brings us on to Letty. Am I allowed to talk about Letty yet?
Well, as soon as Alicia shares her comment, yeah, then we're going to talk about Letty, and we'll start with you. Alicia,
Okay,
your hand was
so
up. I saw it.
After Alicia, yeah.
Oh no, I was just agreeing with the whole 1984 thing.
Oh yeah, very fair.
It was like, yeah.
I've got a whole lot to say about that.
Yeah, but I also think, because I was trying to type it and it'll just take too long. Where the hell are you going? Sorry. Is like the eugenics thing. That's like the Victorian dark secret. But I think to have added that to this novel in any large detail, I think would have made it, well, not unreadable, but damn near impossible. I think it would have added too much weight and too much darkness.
We're already dealing with a lot of complicated themes, and the book is already very massive to tackle those themes. I think you're right. I think it would have taken away from the other themes to muddied the waters a bit to delve into each one.
Yeah.
So, Karen, start us off. Let's talk about Letty a little bit. But before you start, I want to give just a little framing. And then you're at the starting point. You're raring to go. I know you are. So the thing about Letty, I think for me, that I found difficult reading this book is that I really understood Letty. I really related to Letty as a white woman who has been in academics, who really loved to excel with my brain. I was a very driven student of linguistics and loved it so much. As a time traveler who's seen that women are not always treated very well, in fact, often not, it was very easy for me to relate to Letty. And I think for me, I realized that Letty was a little bit of a warning, a lesson, a reminder that it's important to remember that we do have to deal with these issues of economics and gender, but it is important that we never forget that we have our own set of privileges and to not discount the challenges that come with racism, and that Victoire especially stands at this horrible intersection of so many of the things. Even our gentlemen, Rami and Robin, forget that Victoire is suffering from all of the burdens, that the three of them are just suffering from some of them, right? So, Karen, let's talk about Letty. Please share.
Okay,
Where
so
are you
the
at with Letty?
1984 leads into Letty, you see. So the whole time, the first thing when I was reading this, I'm going, okay, they're talking about language and using it to control others. And then you've got the anti-hero who's initially going along with the status quo. Then he effectively gets tortured in room 101 and he's trying to destroy the society from within. So when Letty betrayed them, I was expecting it because she's a bit like Julia, who's with, the two of them together. I think it's Julia, where she's got her own thing and she basically, you can't blame her for trying to save herself. You don't necessarily have to like it because in a book you probably do something else, but in real life you probably might do that. But the whole thing gave off that same claustrophilia, hopelessness of being trapped and controlled by the situation, which is, I guess, what the author really wanted, because they were talking about colonialism and wanted to get that across, which they did. So Letty all along, while I was expecting Letty to betray them, because all along, just straight away, I thought 1984, and I studied that in high school. So I'm going, this is just, it just felt so much to me. And then when she does, you can't sort of, you don't like it and you don't want to like it, but you can sort of understand it, even if you don't like it.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable. Letty's an uncomfortable character.
She's a very complicated character. And doing, unfortunately, I think if she'd been male, she probably would have done something else. But I think being, it's that whole,
She might not have even been there if she'd been male, though. If she'd been her brother, right? We know what would have happened. Thank you, Karen. That's great insight.
Yeah, the 1984 thing just hit me straight in the face, and the whole using language to control, which is one of the first things that people do. They get rid of people, create language, and that's political. We can go the whole hog another time. Yes,
we can. There's so much to pick apart with the language stuff. So, Kelsey, I know you had some thoughts and feelings about Letty, so I have not forgotten. I wanted to come back round to you. So please share some of your insights about Letty.
I agree with your framing of her a lot, which makes this next part really uncomfortable. But like, I thought Letty was like a giant warning sign for why white feminism is so dangerous, because like there are certain aspects where, the feminism where it is important, but like when talking about like suffragettes and things like that, some of the things that they were fighting for white women, there have always been women who worked, just not necessarily in the jobs that they were wanting to have. And her conversations with Rami and like the arguments and stuff, where she'd say, well, I read about the situation in India, and it just, I should have seen where they were going there with and that made that whole part that much more heartbreaking. But like, I thought that that would have been a character that would have been really easy to write poorly, but I thought that that the author added a lot of depth there. But like the whole time I'm like, intersexualism, please.
Right.
Please.
No, Letty, I
I kept
think is
hoping, but no.
right. Well, and we have an interesting thing there, right? With Rami is approaching Letty in one way, and she responds to that in her particular way with Rami. And then Victoria's like, if I'm kind enough, if I'm understanding enough, if I give Letty enough space, if I am supportive enough, she will start to see and understand. And maybe I'm judging her too harshly. And, there are plenty of people who ask for that. They're like, well, your tone was just wrong. You were just so angry. You were so mean to me. That's why I couldn't talk to you and I didn't understand. And so I really understand what Victoire is doing and what Victoire and Rami represent there, but will Letty will Letty do the work is really the question we get.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's
And I did break for her that first time I did talk to the woman professor too. That was such a hard
yes,
conversation. And I thought,
yes,
well, maybe this will be a turning point. And no, no,
no.
no.
And it could have been a turning point. And we never get to see, Professor Kraft's whole experience. So we don't exactly know where she's at and why she can't be more available for Letty. But it really is a pivotal moment in the story. Changes a lot.
It does. I worked in a few different fields where I was the only woman, so that conversation was very familiar.
Mhm,
Um, I
mhm.
had done some engineering work before other things, and I hope that things are different now, but there would be situations where there'd be a woman and it did not go the way that you'd want it to.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Kelsey. Great insights there. And again, Letty is a difficult character. So, all right. Carolius and Beatrix, what are your thoughts on Letty? You mentioned that you felt more sympathy for her the second time around.
Well, yeah, that that was the point where she had a real view of her personhood and who she was, and she weighed the values of friendship against what she saw was a much bigger consequence of that friendship, and so she ratted them out.
Yeah.
Well, and part of it was, I guess you could say, is a lack of imagination. She couldn't imagine any alternatives where if she crossed that boundary, what the world would look like afterward.
Right.
She couldn't imagine a place for herself in that world. There was no place for her to go if she didn't rat them out. Because she was so starved of other ways of looking at the situation.
Hmm, hmm. Yeah. Thank you. I think that's really important that, Letty is the hero of her story. She's not necessarily seeing what could be. She's only seeing what she thinks her story has to be. It adds to the heartbreak of her character. Yeah. All right, let's see. I know, Scone Mistress, you had some thoughts about Letty. I have not forgotten.
I mean, I knew that Letty was going to betray them very early in the book
Mm.
because when they have the picture, Robin sort of has a side message of, oh, the thing, way things were, which, made it sound like, oh, this friend group is going to break up. Probably there's going to be a betrayal. And I looked at them and went, it's probably going to be Letty.
Yeah.
And you could see it very on like the conversation she has with Professor Kraft, and she's very idealistic, and Professor Kraft is like, no, I'm not getting attached to you. It's
Yeah.
not happening. And then that was a big foreshadowing of this is this is not a place for idealists, and your idealism either will die or you will. And I identified a lot with Letty, especially in the it's like having to Letty's whole thing was work within the system to change it from within, and I know that mentality very, very well.
Yeah.
And it's like, oof. And you could see just the choices she made near the end, just how broken she was, that she basically chose, that way instead of these friends who were there. And Robin even says, like, he looks at her and he wants to hug her because they still do love each other as people, but they completely broke over, over Babel and everything else. And it also kind of, there's a little bit also of Letty, after it's, the institution saw that she was part of the betrayers.
Mm.
They gave her a gun and told her to go in front of the policeman into the old library. Like, literally, it's a prove yourself with blood that you still are a part of our organization. And like that bit, oof, like, that's just keep just how how bad it actually is. And she took the gun. She took the gun and she shot one of her best friends so
Not
she
just
could
a
save
best
herself.
friend, right? Not
Yeah,
just a best friend.
yeah.
Yeah, very. It is as Karen said, we all want to think we're going to do one thing in a story and in our imaginations, but you never know what you're going to do in the reality of the situation. And Letty really shines a light on that, and it's a hard light sometimes to be in, and that introspection is really hard. So thank you, Robin. Great insights. All right. So I know, Charity, you have some feelings about this. I'm coming around to you.
So I have big feelings about Letty because I grew up in a predominantly white area that was plagued, in my perspective, plagued by horribly racist things in like elementary school, junior high, because they were trying to bring in those other people, right? But I did not know that white people were the dominant thing because I had just moved there. So my initial thought for Letty was, okay, so you're rich, or at least upper middle class. You're going into this situation, you're gonna be friends with these people of color because you don't have a choice. You have two choices: be empathetic, be understanding, and try to learn, or double down. And she doubled down. I'm like, okay, but maybe because you got 3 years under your belt, you could have gained a little bit of empathy. Tiny, teensy bitsy bits of empathy. Now, I know that I am a violently, inclusive person. And I'm pretty sure everyone knows that because I'm pretty sure most of you have seen me take out people because that's what I do. But not in 3 years did she have a shred of empathy. And when Victoire said, you didn't even notice that the landlady won't let me use the inside bathroom. You've lived there for 3 years together. How? Letty, she couldn't even pee inside. What? Evaporated all hope for Letty, in my opinion. So I knew she was going to betray them. But even the most hardcore, staunch morons, if you give them time, they should be able to gain empathy. Nope. And that's what makes her a villain, because she did not gain a single shred of empathy. She was so worried about not losing her point, her tiny shred of power in the patriarchal white racist supremacy. She is exactly like the suffragettes, exactly like that. I'm like, well, but my people, your people are standing on the backs of other people. Maybe look down, maybe think about this. But she didn't. She chose not to.
Yeah.
And that just worked my last little nerve about her. And then she walks in again. I'm like, oh yeah, saw that coming.
Yeah.
I mean, then she, actually fired it. And I was like, they put bullets in it? No.
Yeah.
Like, that just, it broke me.
Terrible.
And I was at work listening to it.
Oh,
so
no.
I had to go take a moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
That was
So yeah, that was
terrible moment. Yeah.
I understand, and I've met so many Lettys.
Yeah.
But I'm disappointed every single time.
Well, sometimes
Like-
letties are able to finally have that moment of awakening, of knowledge, of epiphany, and have that introspection and grow. But you can only take, as my grandmama used to say, you can lead a horse to water, but you cannot force it to drink. And Letty only drank a little bit from the water of knowledge, right? She did not really imbibe a whole gallon of understanding. So, yeah, unfortunate.
Exactly. The other argument Letty had, was when Victoire wouldn't translate the hoodoo, and she's like, "But why? It's not real anyway." I'm like, okay, then neither is your god. Whatever. Don't mess with this black girl from the West Indies and
Right.
expect her to betray her entire people. Okay, you're that person. I now will never hang out. You're not invited to the Kiki, Letty.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
She's not invited to the Kiki. Letty is not welcome. Yeah. Thank you, Captain Charity. Great insights. All right. Lady June Squill, what are your thoughts on Letty?
Well, geez, being a white female, I didn't like her from the very beginning, but
Yeah.
you know, I sort of figured we weren't supposed to. But I have a bit of a quote from the end, but this made me wonder about future books and stuff.
Yes, 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 yes,
Okay,
yes.
so Victoire is off. She's gone off. The Letty and Victoire are the only ones who've lived through this. And she says she will not let herself think of her friends as they were alive and happy, not Rami torn down in his prime, not Robin, who brought down a tower upon himself because he couldn't think of a way to keep on living, not even Letty, who remains alive and who, if she knows Victoire lives too, will hunt her down to the ends of the earth. Letty, she knows, cannot allow her to roam free. Even the idea of Victoire is a threat. It threatens the core of her very being. It is a proof that she is and always was wrong.
Yes. Yeah. It's a very, very important quote. It sums up so much.
Do you think there's going to be a sequel? I mean,
I don't know. I would read it if there was. Oh, Beatrix has a note. Beatrix.
I was reading some interviews, and one of the things she says is she never wants to repeat a genre. She has so many tales to tell, and she doesn't want to limit herself to any one genre. So even
it wouldn't be a repeat of a genre. It would be taking Victoire back to where she came from, and then so it wouldn't be the whole silver colonialism. It would necessarily be.
No, but it wouldn't be magical realism or whatever you want to call this.
Well, then
historical fantasy.
It would just be people.
So she would not do another historical fantasy.
Okay.
So if she would go back to Victoire, she'd have to tell a different kind of story using a different kind of genre.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we can hope, perhaps. I would read another 600-page tome from her about Victoire, absolutely. But thank you for that insight, Beatrix, because I do think it is important to know that about the author. Yeah, she did write Poppy Wars. Yes. Kelsey and Laura are talking about Poppy Wars in the comments. So we'll see what happens, but I would not keep hope alive that we're going to get a sequel. It would be I would like to know what goes on with Victoire. I would like to follow Victoire's adventures. I'm writing a happy story for her in my heart, though. All right. So Cindy Joy, thoughts about, have I talked to you already about Letty? I cannot recall. All right, please, Letty.
Yeah. Letty, I never really liked her. It was just really, because other people have said it, but she's one of those white women that's blind to anyone else's experience, and it just irritates the hell out of me when people are like that they can't put themselves in someone else's position. They can't see the prejudice that's happening, the systemic prejudice that's ongoing, and that other people are having to live with. they can't take themselves out of their own situation and put themselves into someone else's situation and have any level of empathy.
Yes.
And
Yes.
you know, and she fought to be where she was, and she wants to stay there, and she sacrifices her friends for that.
Yeah.
And you know that it's just kind of despicable.
It is despicable. It's
And she
distressing.
shoots the man she loves for the crime of, you know, not doing what she wants him to do and not being totally white and still falling in love with her. And,
Yeah.
you know, so, but yeah, it's just,
Yeah.
I don't know what I can add that other people haven't.
That's wonderful insights, though. Thank you, Cindy Joy. All right, Alicia, anything to share about Letty?
I think like many people, she's very much a disappointment in that in that this is how we look bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Like I mean, I get her point. I get where she's coming from. I understand her discomfort, but it was like she couldn't see beyond it to realize that you have friends in kind, that you can, despite that, you can gain some empathy. You've got 3 people that while they're not going to completely understand, they're going to get it.
Yes.
And I understand why she did what she did. She got to a point where she was just, no, this is too far. And rather than saying anything, she just did her own thing.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I want to be friends with you, but I'm not able to really communicate how I really feel. And she had never done that for the entire 3 years.
Right.
So
too much stiff
it's
upper
like,
lip.
yeah. And it's like, I mean, it's just, I should feel uncomfortable, but I do. Because who do we not know? How many people do you not know, or do you know who are that? Right?
Yes. Yeah.
And it's like, you're making us look bad, man.
Well, also, it is this thing where it's like, my goodness, you know, you're holding up a bit of a mirror and you're like, all right, am I like this? Is this representative of me? What does this mean about me? It's a time for introspection. But also, yes, we've all met people who are Letties. Just as we've all met Professor Lowells and we've all met Professor Playfair's, you know, and a number of other characters in the book, right, who probably are representative of people we know in our real lives. Yeah. So,
but yeah, I did find Letty probably the more uncomfortable and disappointing than any of the other characters. I think because Mirror.
Yeah, you know, I wanted her to grow. I wanted her to improve. I wasn't necessarily expecting it, but it's what I wanted. And she didn't in some
and they didn't. It was like, God damn it.
Right.
Why?
Letty. Yeah. Thank you, Alicia. Excellent. Laura, welcome back. I'm so glad you were able to rejoin us. So, do you have any thoughts on Letty?
Yeah, my internet is unstable, so hopefully I can stay here.
Fingers crossed.
My only thoughts on Letty are, I mean, second pretty much everything that everyone else has said. When they're trying to explain to her, you know, the systemic prejudice that they all face, and she starts crying and they're comforting her, and Robin comments in his brain that, you know, why is she the one who's crying when we're the ones who've had to endure all of this? And it just reminded me of my brother and I having a conversation with some older female relatives and having them all be very insistent that they had no privilege because they have had hard things in their lives too. And they were very upset and very adamant. And I'm like, that's, you know, I have Letty in my family, you know. And
Yeah,
yeah, it's hard.
it is hard. So I want to thank you all for this wonderful conversation today. Technically, we are at the end of our time. I will be honest, we could keep going. There's so much to talk about. I would love to deep dive on translation, as I have translated and I have done the work of translation. I would love to talk about some of the academic things around linguistics in this book, because it is beautifully, profoundly well done. And I felt deeply that this book was almost written for me in some ways, because I was like, oh, a book about linguists who care about colonialism. Oh no, thank you so much, Rebecca Kuang. I know you don't know who I am, but I appreciate the gift of this book. And Lady June Squall's right. There's so much around the silver and the silver working, and silver is such a metaphor. I think Kelsey shared that she'd had to look up the Opium War as reading this book, and silver is a huge portion of that war. You know, they ran out of silver to send to China. They were melting down their silver teapots, and they still could not buy all of the things, namely tea, one of the favorite beverages of my life, that they wanted from China, and the Chinese did not, you know, they weren't interested in the other exports, right? And so opium as an alternative is a really upsetting choice, to put it mildly. So the silver is really important. The fact that she chose silver to be the recipient of this power and this magic, and to be the sort of catalyst by which the loss of translation is transported, is really beautiful and poetic. I'm sorry we don't have time to get into it. And I'm very sorry we don't have time to get into translation, because I'd take you on a 3-hour tour to go down the translation conversation. So I will say, however, if you're wondering, it's well done. That part is well done. And they are really hitting on some true theories and complexities of translation. If you want to take a very brief moment before we wrap up, and everybody has to be really short, including me, I would love to hear from everyone before we say goodnight, where you stand. Just really quick. Do you want somebody to take the translation to you as the reader, or to bring the translation closer to the author of the source material? So we're going to do a lightning round, and then we're going to say goodnight. Karen, you're an author. You get to go first.
Reword the question.
Right. If you are translating something, do you want the translation to be more readable, accessible for the reader? Do you want it to have more fidelity to the author,
Oh gosh.
the original? You're running out of time.
It runs it. Okay, it depends on the author, because some authors have got a lot to say and need to be done the thing, and other authors do the feeling and gist of it. So it depends on the type of story.
All right, great. Okay, good. It's quick. It's lightning round. Alicia, author, reader.
I would say in most cases, probably the author.
All right, great. Beatrix, Corolius, what are your thoughts? Author or reader?
Well, as someone who is still sort of actively involved in translating of various languages, in the past, I would translate things according to the organization and who would be reading the translation.
Okay.
And so that's what I would do.
Excellent. Thank you. Beatrix.
So, this is sideways to translation, but what you made me think of was Georgette Heyer, who translated Regency England for us into modern prose.
She did. She did. Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah. So sometimes it's important, right, to bring it to the reader. All right, Cindy Joy. Translation, do you think it's important to go closer to the author or closer to the reader?
I think it has to be a balance, but it has to be readable by the reader, or it doesn't do anybody any good to have it translated.
So you're more on the reader side. All right, good.
Well, and they go into this in the book, that just because the word translates into this other word, that doesn't mean the meanings are the same.
That's correct.
You need it to be translated by someone who is fluent in both languages and can translate the meaning.
Yeah.
The meaning needs to be translated.
It's complicated.
I don't know if that's closer to the author or closer to the reader.
So there's no right answer here, by the way, and I'm not judging you. I'm just curious. So, all right, Lady June Squill, what are your thoughts?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't really have an opinion about that because I have never been able. I'm not fluent in enough languages to ever translate something, and so I suppose author, because they're the ones who had the emotional feelings about what they wrote.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Lady June Squill. Kelsey, what are your thoughts?
Think closer to the author, with the caveat that there should be footnotes for the reader to go and do their own work to understand their cultural references.
All right. Excellent. Thank you, Kelsey. Captain Charity, what do you think?
Author, hands down, every time author, because I can look up the things that I don't understand for references and cultural stuff, but I didn't know what they said to begin with.
All right.
So I don't want it translated, because that's how you get the Odyssey that lasted for the patriarchy.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Captain Charity. Dear Lady Laura, what are your thoughts?
Okay, so for me, I'd rather have it be closer to the author and, like Kelsey said, do my own research so that I can understand all of the cultural references and stuff. However, if it's for a younger audience, like for children, for education, I'd rather have it be closer to the reader. And then as a teacher, you can bring in some of those other things to help them understand the author.
Okay, thank you. And Scone Mistress, what are your thoughts?
I agree it should be close to the author, but you do need to make some caveats, especially if it's translating different culture. There's a number of discussions that I've seen, particularly in the Terry Pratchett forums, of things that don't work for other ones. Like for Terry Pratchett, like death is meant to be, while it's a skeleton, a male character, and I believe it's Spanish translations, their version of death is a woman. And so you get some confusion with Spanish speakers reading it, because of if death is in there expecting it to be a female character. And so you have to know who is reading it, and it's small things like that where you need to make sure that it's translatable for the reader.
Yeah, interesting. All right, thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm going to leave you with this, that it's important to read some translations that have happened in the last 20 years compared to the translations that happened in the 19th century. Very different philosophical approach. The 19th century kind of messes with things a bit, and the 21st century messes with things in a totally different way. So, but think about that, because translation is at the heart of this story, and there are not exactly any right answers when it comes to translation. So, my darlings, this was a wonderful discussion. Thank you so much for joining us for
I have
the
one
discussion.
thought.
Yeah, yes.
I need a final thought. I need this final thought.
All right.
The reason that this book was so important to me is because it reminded me why I love the Temporal Entourage and our book clubs and everything. Because we take all of the aesthetics of the Victorian age without the misogyny and racism, and that makes me love you all so much. That's my point. That's why I love you guys, because all the greatness of the exploration and the goodness without the racism and misogyny. And I love you all. Okay, I'm done.
Well, I adore you too, Captain Charity, and I do think we're all committed to learning and doing our best and improving, and when we make mistakes, doing better in the future. And honestly, my darlings, as we discussed at the beginning, all of our heroic characters in this book are flawed. So I never expect you to be perfect, but I'm so proud of you for showing up and being willing to learn and do better, because that is the very best any of us can do. So good job. Also, Captain Charity was a lot sweeter about it, but same thing. So next month we're reading Buffalo Soldiers by Maurice Brodis, and the author is intending to join us next month. I want to let you know that there might be an adjustment to the schedule for next month, so please keep your eyes out for that. But this is the book we're reading. It is a much shorter book. It's pulpier, and it's also talking about some heavy topics by comparison. But since we have a shorter month, and multiple conventions coming up, we did not expect you to read Babel for February. We're not going to torment you with college academic tomes every month of book club, but I certainly appreciate all of you being willing to show up, read this, talk about it, have this wonderful conversation. And you all did have so many wonderful thoughts. Thank you for sharing them with all of us. For those of you who are following along now or later on Facebook, thank you for joining us. You should know that book club generally happens every third Sunday of the month, excepting March and December when we take little breaks. And it's always at 4:30 p.m. Pacific time in the North America, which if you need a city, we use Seattle. And we have our book club list posted in the Temporal Textual Talks, which is our book club group. You are all welcome to join. Our dear Bill Bodden, our buttery goodness, and I put together our book club list at the end of every year. We have no intention of stopping anytime soon, but we welcome your recommendations, and we are not able to always include them, but we always want them. Babel was a book that was recommended to us this year, for instance. So please continue to send your recommendations. Please share your favorite steampunk books with us. And yes, we do read a lot of things that is steampunk adjacent. And this is certainly one of them. You'll notice I didn't ask you if Babel was steampunk or not. So I don't think it was important to this discussion. But my darlings, we are going to wrap up for tonight. Please remember to treasure yourselves as I treasure you. You are irreplaceable, and that means you are responsible for taking care of yourselves, which means drinking more tea, getting your boosters, washing your hands, wearing the cool hat, and having a good time, all right? So I'm going to get that link, but to everyone on Facebook, have a good night.